Ladies and gentlemen, let us resume the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting of Tuesday, October 5th,
Recording in progress.
2021. We know the meeting was properly warned because I asked Peter at 5:30 when we began executive session. And we have a number of minutes to approve as our first order of business. I'll read the dates just to show how busy we've been. September 14th, special meeting, September 14th, regular meeting, which was rescheduled from September 7th. September 15th, special meeting, and September 15th, a second special meeting, and September 21st, regular meeting. So we have minutes for all those meetings, and I would like a motion to approve those minutes.
I just say so moved.
Yes. Daniel has moved to approve all those meetings minutes. All in favor, select board members, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 That's 5-0. The motion's passed. Thank you very much. As for chair's remarks, I have one bookkeeping item. Yesterday, we had an executive session starting at 2:30 in the afternoon, and we did in fact adjourn at 7:45, but we did not formally adjourn. So I'm letting you know that we did adjourn and we took no action. Thank you very much. Are there town manager comments?
Not this evening, thank you.
Select board member comments? I know Jessica has a comment.
Sure, I'll go first. I'm just want to take the moment to acknowledge and celebrate that Monday is Indigenous Peoples Day. Very exciting. Love that the state of Vermont is acknowledging the name change of that day and all the connotations that go along with it. So I just also want to mention this land that Brattleboro is located on is also called Wampastica. It's the home of the Sokoke tribe of the Abenaki people. They're part of the Wabanaki Confederacy. And just a bit of history, that this land was taken from the Abenaki people without a treaty and given to Colonel William Brattle, who never in fact set foot here on this land. So that is part of the legacy that we have as leaders of this municipality. And I think that it's important to take a moment to just acknowledge that truth, that history, and the fact that we still have Indigenous people in our community and they're doing amazing things, building community, returning the culture. There's the Atawi Project, which I highly recommend following on social media or engaging with in other ways. There's an Abenaki language school in Vermont now, and there are just so many wonderful workshops and events happening that are bringing back the culture, which has this legacy in the 20th century of systemic erasure through a program called eugenics, which happened in the state of Vermont, which attempted to erase and quiet and destabilize the culture of the Indigenous people of our community. So I just wanted to say all of that in celebration and recognition and acknowledgement of Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday.
Thank you, Jessica. Other select board members like to speak? Tim?
Oh, I would let Daniel go if he wants.
Photo finish, but I gave it to you.
Thank you. I had two quickish things. Now I think I have three because thank you, Jessica, for reminding us that Indigenous Peoples Day, sometimes have trouble with that. Peoples Day is Monday. And by my memory, not only did Brattleboro declare that, didn't we beat the state?
Yes, we did. At town meeting.
Yeah, I think it was my first or second year on the board. So that's always a point of pride with me. We did the same thing with the plastic bag ban, but that's less relevant. So that was my first. And now my second is I wanted to just shout out, a lot of people haven't heard this, but our own Peter Elwell, who is here with us, just a few days ago received VLCT, that's Vermont League of Cities and Towns, Lifetime Achievement Award, which is quite an honor. I think it normally is reserved for people who literally spend entire lifetimes in one position or several town positions within the same town. But I think they wanted to recognize Peter's outstanding contributions, not only to VLCT, but of course to Brattleboro for 6 years, over 6 years. Almost seven. Yeah. So I just want to let people know that happened. There wasn't a lot of press about it, but you know, it's a big deal, I think. And finally, I just wanted to give, trying to spin this in a positive way, because you know me, but in my service on the local Cannabis Advisory Commission, it's a committee that advises the Cannabis Control Board on certain items that they're going to be pushing forward to our legislature very soon. There's been a lot of good progress made in the one subcommittee I serve on, which is called Public Health, doing a lot of discussions about warning labels, everything from the number of feet that cannabis establishments, like retail establishments especially, should be away from schools and youth centers, et cetera, like that. The role of municipalities when it comes to zoning and all of that. So a lot of good work in there. The distressing part to me is that a subcommittee that I was not invited to serve on has gone forward with a very poor recommendation for Vermont towns at this point, and indeed for Vermont taxpayers, in my opinion. So they are setting a very low, at the moment, a very low cap to which towns can have any fees carved out for them with the fee structure. The fee structure for the state, of course, is very generous, but the fee structure for towns is, I would say, insultingly low, is probably the most positive way I could put it. It's not a done deal yet, and there are other avenues for appealing this strange decision, but you can rest assured that I'm following those leads and doing the best I can to advocate for some fairness at municipal level. So that's my wrap up for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Jessica, did you want to address what Tim has said?
I just was curious, Tim, if there are any advocacy action steps or other things that community members can get involved with. Will you be letting us know?
Thanks for asking that. I'm going to be writing about it very soon. There is a couple things that I have in mind, and I'll now feel welcome to share that with the rest of this board at our next meeting. So thank you.
Great. Daniel?
I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank Jessica for her words there. Very powerful. And also thank Tim for his updates. Very helpful.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. And I thank you all.
Oh,
And
congratulations, Peter.
yeah, congratulations, Peter. I tell you what, take next year off, Peter.
Thank you, Liz.
Public participation. Is there a member of the public who would like to speak about an issue that is not on tonight's agenda? All right, I see a hand. Kurt Dames. Hello, Kurt. Good evening.
Hello, this is Kurt Dimes, District 2 in Brattleboro. I would like to bring your attention to this picture behind me. And this shows the results of the research of one Professor Bradshaw, Corey Bradshaw, who's the director of the Global Climate Research Lab in Flinders University in Melbourne, Australia. And it shows the difference in the total animal biomass. That is the weight of all animals 10,000 years ago and the weight of all animals now. And when I saw this, I was already tending to believe the science about the livestock gases being the very great contributor to climate change. But when I saw this, I not only believed it, I said, well, this really makes it very believable, because you can see the total weight of all the humans in the world now is more than the total weight of all the animals in the world 10,000 years ago. And the weight of all the cows is many times more than all the animals that ever existed 10,000 years ago. I was very, anyway, you think you're already shocked and you think you're already dismayed, and then you see something like this and you say, wow, it really has got to be true then. That's on my mind because of the legislation that has come from the Climate Crisis Committee of the school board and will be on the school director's menu agenda next week. I thought the select board might want to endorse it. The select board should endorse it. It requires a plant-based diet for the schools, and it requires once a month a day of training on climate education for the faculty, and another day a month for students to focus entirely on the climate. This is not just, tweaking the agenda so they learn a little bit about climate. They'll be doing that anyway. But besides that, once a month, the students will focus entirely on climate for a day. Now, that helps students and teachers, but how can families discuss the climate crisis together? Who has the time? BCS will also propose to the school directors that Thanksgiving and Christmas vacations should be renamed climate vacations and devoted to sharing people sharing their concerns about the climate with their loved ones, and with guidance available through the parent teacher associations of the school. We're calling this sharing, not shopping. And isn't that what Christmas should and Thanksgiving should be about? The proposal saves money, it prevents shopping stress and pollution from extra merchandise, and most importantly, it saves time so that everyone can have a real time to get real about the absolutely most important thing in the world, with the absolutely most important people in your world. And I especially, I'm sorry, I get a little bit upset about it. I hope you can propose that you find the select board should find a way to help this kind of thing, help the school directors do the right thing, and provide a way for people to talk about it. That's next Tuesday.
Bert, thank you very much for this information. As you know, these items cannot be discussed because they haven't been warned. But thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Sure.
Good evening. All right. Now we have a consent agenda. There are 4 items in the consent agenda. One is to the review of the proposed FY23 budget. It's a schedule of meetings. Then there's the Field to Fork grant that we discussed several meetings ago to accept and appropriate. Winter sand purchases and an executive recruiter for town manager search $1,000 additional fee. All in favor? I would like a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. Anyone? There you are, Ian.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. All select board members in favor of moving the consent agenda as presented, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion has carried 5-0. Now, how about a motion to become liquor commissioners?
I move that we convene as liquor commissioners.
Thank you, Jessica. All select board members in favor of convening as liquor commissioners, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Great. We are now liquor commissioners. Let me invite Peter to discuss the liquor licenses.
Thank you. So in April of each year, or March perhaps, but in the spring of each year, the select board reviews a much longer list of renewals of liquor licenses. Those are the full gamut of first, second, and third class liquor licenses and related entertainment and outdoor consumption permits. And so those are annual. They're issued as an annual license, and you review them as a group once a year and call out those that have had violations in the past 12 months so that you can take a look specifically at what the violations were and what corrective actions have been taken, but otherwise generally approve them straight through as a slate. There also is a kind of a quirk in the state statute related to third class liquor licenses that allows the holders of those licenses to take them 6 months at a time instead of on an annual basis. Most of the holders of these licenses choose as part of their annual renewal process just to renew for a year. But we do have 3 in town that renew, have historically reviewed and are currently renewing for 6 months at a time. And that's Echo Restaurant and Lounge on Main Street, Flamingo Diner on Canal Street, and New England House out on Marlborough Road. And so those 3 are before you tonight for their mid-year renewal. I'm happy to say that that none of those 3 has had any violations with DLC during the past 12 months. Staff has conducted its normal review of other factors in terms of like being up to date with payments to the town and those sorts of things. Everything is in compliance, and we're happy to recommend that you approve the renewal of these 3 third-class liquor licenses.
Great. Ian?
I just have one question, Peter. And I think I understand from what you just presented that these 3 businesses are aware that they could be doing their third-class liquor license on a yearly basis, and they're just choosing to. It's not an instance of they're not aware of it.
That's my understanding. Yes, I haven't interacted directly with the 3 businesses about this, but it's my understanding they've made a choice that this cycle works better for them.
Cool. Just wanted to make sure.
And it does allow the public to appreciate the fact that they exist twice a year. Are there any other issues or concerns that select board members might have?
I don't have any.
All right. Having reviewed all the paperwork, a potential motion might be in order.
Sure, I got it.
Thank you, Jessica.
I move that we approve the renewal of third-class liquor licenses for Echo Restaurant and Lounge at 69 to 73 Main Street, Flamingo Diner at 209 Canal Street, and New England House at 254 Marlborough Road.
Thank you. Jessica has moved to approve the renewal of third-class liquor licenses for Echo Restaurant and Lounge at 6973 Main Street, Flamingo Diner at 209 Canal Street, and New England House at 254 Marlborough Road. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Yes,
I
Jessica.
realized that motion didn't include the entertainment license for Echo. Is that something that we need to specify in the motion or make another motion for?
I don't believe so. Let me take a quick look. My understanding was this was just about third-class licenses tonight. Let me take.
I just noticed that it was the entertainment piece was noted in the list.
Mhm.
Just want to make sure they can still keep doing awesome music.
Yeah, good
Thank you,
eye.
Jessica.
Yeah.
That's good.
We'll make sure.
So, outside consumption, I guess just it wouldn't hurt to be safe to bootstrap it. There are outside consumption permits that are allowed. But actually, as I'm looking at it, so I wish now that Hillary were in the meeting. I'm going to talk for a minute. If she's watching, maybe she'll come into the meeting. And if you're concerned enough about this, we can hold on this action and address it later in the meeting, and I can communicate with her in the meantime. What I would say, though, is from conferring with her in preparation for this, what I can see on this paperwork on the next to last page of the backup for this item confirms that these are the third-class seasonal licenses that are before you tonight. What it states regarding the outside consumption and the entertainment there is related to the fact that they also hold those other. So it mentions their first-class license, outside consumption, and entertainment in 2 of the 3 cases, and it mentions entertainment actually in all 3 cases. So if you want me to confirm with Hillary that we're really only dealing with third class tonight, I'm happy to do that. And you could hold
Yeah.
on this action.
I would, and just so that we know we're doing everything according to Hoyle, and thank you, Jessica. And so we'll adjourn as liquor commissioners for the time being and go back if Peter says that's necessary.
Well, you'll need to go back so that you can take your vote, but I think it's right that you adjourn and get on with other business. In the meantime, I just want to let you know, I'm going to go mute so that I can communicate with Hillary about this, and I'll be back into the meeting shortly.
Okay, great. All
Yeah,
right,
we
so
just did.
we'll take our vote. Did we do that?
We did.
Okay, good.
Oh, we did.
So- So now we can adjourn if someone would so move.
I move that we adjourn as liquor commissioners.
Very good. All in favor of adjourning as liquor commissioners, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right. Would someone like to convene as water and sewer commissioners?
I'll make a motion to convene as water and sewer commissioners.
Thank you. All in favor of convening as water and sewer commissioners, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Very good. We are now water and sewer commissioners. And I would ask Patrick to speak to water plant financing.
Good evening, everybody. Patrick Moreland here, and I just wanted to give a brief update on water treatment plant financing. As the board will recall, and hopefully most of the public will recall, we took the water treatment facility project to representative town meeting back in March. And at that time, representative town meeting authorized the town to borrow an amount not to exceed $12.5 million at an interest rate of not to exceed 5%. At that time, we had confidence that we could do much better than that, but we didn't have the specific details, and it was time for the project to move forward. We also knew at that time that the state, who was interested in facilitating this project, would provide certain subsidy or grants to the town, but wanted to stretch that out over 2 state program years, fiscal 20 and fiscal 21. Now, back in June, the board executed the initial loan agreement. That was the fiscal 20 borrowing, and that was for a total of $5.93 million. That was loan 403-3.0. And that was for, like I said, $5.93 million, of which we were told at the time that we would receive a grant in the amount of $4.1 million, which was great news. We were off to a fantastic start. We now have the fiscal 21 state program year borrowing. This is loan 403-3.1. It supersedes the previous loan or incorporates it. It raises the borrowed sum up to $12.5 million, and it adds an additional $1 million in subsidy, or an additional $1 million grant. What this means is that for $12.5 million worth of capital to fund the new water treatment facility, the ratepayers will only be responsible for repaying $7.3 million. And we can confirm that that entire sum will be loaned to the town at an interest rate of 0%, which is obviously far better than 5%. So that is the news this evening, and the board is asked to approve the new loan agreement. And I would take any questions from the board of the public.
All right, Daniel.
Thanks. Good news. Gotta love that free money. Thank you. When we talked about this last, sort of asked about the impact on utility rates. Remind me, Patrick, of our process for setting rates. We do it over a multi-year thing, right? And
Yes, we
last
do.
time we did it was
We typically pass rates in 5-year increments. We just did that this last spring. Although each and every year we still bring the rates back to the board when we set the utility budget, and we have every intention of doing the same thing this coming spring, just for a second look at the rates to make sure that we've set them accordingly. And at that time, we were planning on a project that was going to be far more expensive to the ratepayers than this project is turning out to be. So I would imagine the board would want to take a close look at that in the spring and potentially reconsider the rate structure.
Yes, please. Very much so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well. And this time we won't have Peter to talk me out of that. So
Anyone else?
we could
care
talk
to
about him
comment?
because he's on mute. Yeah.
All right, so we've
Anyone
been
else?
We
asked
could
to
talk about him
approve
'cause
this
he's on
loan
mute.
agreement,
Yeah.
and I've been asked to sign the loan agreement. And
all right,
so welcome
been
a
We
motion
could
to
talk about him
approve
'cause
this
he's on
loan
mute.
agreement.
Yeah.
Daniel. And I've been
I
asked
move to
sign
approve the loan agreement, including exhibits
And,
A through
alright,
D, with the
so
Vermont
welcome
State
and
Revolving
asked to
Fund
approve this
administered
loan
by
agreement.
the Vermont Municipal
Daniel.
Bond Bank
And,
in the not to
I
exceed
move to
sum
approve the
of
loan agreement,
$12.5 million
exhibits
for
A
the
through D,
Brattleboro
with
Water
the
Treatment
Vermont
Facility
State
Replacement Project,
administered by the
and to authorize Select Board Chair Elizabeth McLaughlin to sign the loan agreement and any other documents necessary to execute the loan on behalf of the town.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel has moved to approve the loan agreement, including exhibits A through D, with the Vermont State Revolving Fund administered by the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank in the not to exceed sum of $12,500,000 for the Brattleboro Water Treatment Facility Replacement Project, and to authorize Select Board Chair Elizabeth McLaughlin, that's me, to sign the loan agreement and any other documents necessary to execute the loan on behalf of the town. All Select Board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Aye. Great. All right, thank you very much. That motion has carried. And if anyone would like to adjourn, make a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners, I would certainly entertain that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Great. Tim has made that motion. All Select Board members in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Thank you, Patrick.
All right, unfinished business. Yes, thank you, Patrick. Unfinished business, COVID matters. Peter's back with us, and let's have him introduce this matter. Thank you. Peter?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
I just got back. I had you on silent so that I could have the telephone conversation. The answer on the liquor is we did exactly what we were supposed to do. Your vote that you've already taken is all you needed to do tonight. It relates only to the third class.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So we don't get to reconvene as liquor commissioners.
No, that'd be a first. And
That would be a first, yeah. Oh, well.
okay. So are we now on COVID?
We are. If you could
Okay, great.
introduce that matter, thank you.
Yeah. So you've seen my memorandum. There's really no material change. I will say I checked again. I wrote the memorandum on Thursday, so what's in writing and has been out there over the weekend is what was accurate completely as of Thursday. There are small changes since then, and they're positive, but there are still 12 of 14 instead of 13 of 14 counties in Vermont that are at a high rate of transmission. Windham County still is one of those. Here in Windham County, our rate of transmission, or I should say our rate of new positive cases is slightly reduced. The 7-day average is slightly reduced over the prior 7-day average, but is still running greater than 10 people a day, 10 new cases a day in Windham County. The number of people vaccinated, percentage of people vaccinated has increased from 65.8 to 66.2. So either the data caught up to the tracking, or there was actually a flurry last week of people getting vaccinated, because in the prior 2 weeks, the data had only moved by 0.2%. And then over the course of 5 days, it moved by 0.4%. So, but in my opinion, I don't think any of that materially changes where we are. It's, the indicators are heading in the right direction, but still high rate of transmission, still new cases occurring. So, the issue is on the agenda this evening for you to decide whether or not to modify how we're holding meetings, or whether to continue doing this, at least until 2 weeks from now, perhaps, a longer interval. What you did the last time was a month ago, you decided to do 2 more meetings this way and then consider it tonight. So that's the question before you. Do we continue to meet this way? Do we go back to in-person with Zoom available, but not the primary method of meeting? And if we're going to stay this way, when would you like to have it on the agenda again?
Well, I'm content with the status quo, for the next month, but I'm open to suggestions. Tim?
Thank you, Liz. I agree with Peter, but I'm heartened by a lot of the data I'm seeing. We are actually behind the nation with our downward curve of both cases and hospitalizations and poor outcomes. So we're a little behind the rest of the nation for once, because it looks like these 2-month surges happen pretty regularly all over the world, actually. And the rest of the United States had theirs a little earlier. But anyway, I was going to suggest, as a little bit more of a proactive approach than let's just kick it down the road another month, that the first meeting in November, which is the 2nd or something like that, I don't have a calendar in front of me.
It's the 2nd.
Yeah, is our first budget meeting. It's our budget overview. I really would love to be in person for all of our budget meetings. I would suggest that we say that is our target, that we're planning on being in person, hybrid, of course, with encouragement to be on Zoom for safety for others. And if we want to derail that train, we can agree to do that at our very next meeting in 2 weeks. Because I think in 2 weeks, we're going to see that this is either a trend, a clear trend, and we're feeling more comfortable, or not. So if it's still a good news going forward, we can just keep to our word that we're going to be meeting in person. And the last thing I'll say is that we did just meet a couple times for a very important matter for a pretty good portion of the day. So I just encourage the rest of my select board members to keep that in mind, and let's all be brave and try to make November 2nd our target. That's my speech.
I don't know that's necessarily a matter of being brave, but Danny, would you like to address that?
Yeah, I was going to propose something similar. I hope that by November 2nd, we will see a clear decline. All signs point to that should be the case. And as Tim says, in 2 weeks' time, if that is looking otherwise, we can do something different. But I think that's a good proposal.
How does anyone else want to talk about how they feel about that?
I'm
No.
on board.
All right, so we are kicking it down to 2 weeks. Peter,
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest, since it seems as though there's a majority of you who support that approach, I think the way to do it to stay properly warned for the potential that you might take an action 2 weeks from now that alters that course if the data doesn't keep going in the right direction is to put a consent agenda item on 2 weeks from tonight, where I'll do a 1-page memorandum that just says, if you approve this item on the consent agenda, then you're going to be holding the November 2nd meeting in person in the select board meeting room. And if any of you have changed your minds at that point, you'd be able to pull it off the consent agenda and have a select board discussion and action about it. Otherwise, it'll be the simplest way for you to just stay on that track.
Jessica?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
A follow-up question, just making sure that the public will be able to participate both in person and online.
Yes, in the way that they were that couple of times when we did this, I think it was in August, sometime during the summer, we held a couple of meetings where we were in the room spaced, and there's, chairs there for the public to be able to come in person if they wish. It is a smaller available space. In order to stay spaced, of course, everybody will be masked, and in order to stay distanced, there are a smaller number of seats than when we all can get elbow to elbow. But yes, it would be possible for members of the public to participate either in person or on Zoom, whichever they prefer.
And it's possible now for people to be present at the select board meeting room.
That's true.
Ian?
And for the meetings that we had in August that were like that, we had participation both in Zoom and in person from the public, and it was successful. So, Tim, I really appreciate you coming forward with this plan. I think it makes a lot of sense, and keeping to sort of the theme of this pandemic of checking in as we move forward to continue to watch the numbers and make sure that we're making decisions based on the science and on the numbers makes a lot of sense. So, but I really agree and appreciate your desire to be in person for the budget, as that is so important, and it's worth moving towards that in person for sure.
All right, that is our decision.
Daniel has a hand up.
Daniel?
Thanks. Just kind of thinking about, like, were members of the public to show up in the meeting room and there were to be more members of the public than there are seats available, there is like no recourse for the town to say, you must go away. We do not have enough seats for you, right? There's no capacity thing. There's,
Yep.
And I'm not saying it's desirable. I wouldn't want people to be turned away. I just kind of want to be clear that
you're saying what happens when, and Peter will tell us.
There is a legal obligation at that point to close down the meeting and reconvene another time. So there actually is an example 7 years or so ago in Brattleboro of that happening on a matter that was of great interest to the public. And so many people showed up in the select board meeting room that there were people, filling the select board meeting room, filling the Hannah Cosman room, and extending down the hall. And the meeting couldn't go on because there were people out in the hallway who were not able to participate in the meeting. So the select board closed the meeting and agreed to have it some other time soon after that. I don't know exactly whether it was like a day later or a week later. And I believe it was at BUHS, but I'm not certain. But in any case, they went to a larger venue to hold that meeting so that everyone who wanted to be, present could be present for the meeting.
Which is an advantage to Zoom because we can have many more people, and we just need to keep that in mind. Daniel?
Tim, sorry, Chair McLaughlin, if you so wish to call on Tim.
Well, I just thought you'd want to finish your thought.
No, I feel like Tim is going to say
All right,
something
Tim,
more useful than
I was just going to mention that Hannah Cosman is definitely a viable room. All you would need is I think actually there's a speaker that runs in there because I was part of the BCTV setup. So if you wanted to add an extra monitor, that's not a heavy lift for BCTV. Just FYI. And we have the added advantage that at the beginning of budget season is pretty much when everybody runs in the opposite direction from the municipal center. So I would predict that there won't be a huge draw for budget.
Except that now that you've said that,
Well,
Daniel.
I could only
So
hope.
I have an unresolved thing here. So I think that the way that we've been doing the seating is like the most cautious way of doing it. It's not currently happening in other spaces. You know, if you were to go and have dinner in, you know, a restaurant or have lunch in one of our cafes, you know, you can sit cheek to jowl next to one another. And there's nothing right now that says that businesses and, you know, places can't do that. I think where we really limit the amount of seating in the room, we're running into we're creating a situation where we could be in, you know, this thing where we're holding a budget meeting. It's about a topic that people have an interest in. 20 of them arrive, right? And I would like to think that if 20 people show up to a select board meeting, we will hold that meeting, and, you know, we wouldn't have to reconvene for some other place. You know, the masking requirement is great. I think when masking is happening in a place with high numbers of people being vaccinated, we should let people decide whether they feel comfortable standing next to one another rather than have to like close down the meeting.
Tim.
I just, you know.
Yeah, Ian.
I guess my response to that, Daniel, is it may not even, it's not maybe not even worth our discussion, because that may be the fully under the discretion of Peter, because it's the municipal center and he gets to decide what the COVID precautions are. So he decides whether there are mask requirements. He decides if there needs to be social distancing. That's not a decision of the board.
Well, I would just like to point out in continuance of that thought, Ian, that if someone chooses to go to a restaurant, they choose to go to a restaurant. But there are people, including ourselves, who are required to be at the select board meeting if it's important, and that includes town staff. So extra precautions might be appropriate because of that differential.
I'm just saying it's maybe not worth wasting our time talking about it if it's not something that we have any control over.
I would like to say that if we get into a situation where 20 people are in the select board meeting room because there's something important to them happening in that meeting that night, that we do not shut that meeting down and then have to take, you know, have it take place someplace else. If those 20 people are wearing masks and otherwise complying with reasonable.
Why don't we
precautions.
let those thoughts filter over to Peter so that he can respond as the person who safeguards the municipal center building? And he can come to us in 2 weeks with the
Yeah, that I would appreciate that, actually. I'd like some time to think about how we might try to not just set the room up the way we do when there's no COVID to be concerned about, and yet also maximize the ability for people to attend in person if they choose to. And I'll give some attention to that with town staff, and I'll write up where we land on that for the consent agenda item 2 weeks from now. And you'll either end up feeling good about that or needing to discuss it some more.
Great.
Great. Jessica, you had another thought?
Just had one other thought, which was wondering if it needs to be in that particular room. And the idea of, you know, if we really want it to be in person and we really want to make sure that plenty of people can participate, that might be another option on the table.
And I think that's a good thought. We can look at other options. One of the factors there that's important for these meetings that isn't as important for some other adaptations for COVID is that it is that BCTV is readily able to do a live broadcast. There's only certain locations where the building is wired in a way that they can do a live broadcast. but there's a number of them around town. So that's another thing we can take a look at, is whether just you routinely meeting in a larger space for the next few months while you're doing budget at least would work to, you know, accommodate all these different priorities.
Great. So we'll leave it up to you, Peter, to come to us with something in 2 weeks.
Will do.
Thank you. All right. Stop signs on Guilford Street and South Street. Peter?
So this is before you for second reading and public hearing. After I introduce the item, it would be appropriate for you to open a public hearing. Here, if there are any comments from the public before you then deliberate and take action. The ordinance, as you well know from when we discussed it a couple of weeks ago, and for the benefit of the public, the reason why you heard chuckles just now is Vermont state law requires that the select board actually pass an ordinance establishing the location of every individual stop sign that exists in town, and some other arcane things too regarding traffic. The statutes related to what select boards can do and how they must do it related to traffic regulations are get into the very granular detail under Vermont law. So tonight, what you're looking at for the second time, and hopefully final time, is the placement of a stop sign. I will say staff in these cases this evening has actually taken these actions. We're asking you to adopt this ordinance so that these become official stop signs in these locations and can be enforced. We have placed stop signs in each direction of Guilford Street at the entrance to Memorial Park. So that now functions as a three-way stop. People coming out of the park are stopping, and people going in each of the two directions on Guilford Street are stopping. It has significantly positively affected the speed of traffic and the safety for pedestrians in that congested area. So we ask that those be made permanent and official. And then over on South Street, near the West Brattleboro Fire Station, there used to be a yield sign, and there's additional pedestrian activity in that area now. And there's also been historically some concerns about visibility up the hill there. And so in any case, it was recommended to us by someone from the neighborhood that we change the yield sign to a stop sign at that location. Both of these matters, all three of these signs at the two different locations, this was reviewed by the Traffic Safety Committee, and the Traffic Safety Committee unanimously recommended that the select board pass this ordinance along with staff's recommendation that you pass this ordinance. So it'd be appropriate now for you to open a public hearing, hear any public comment that may be coming, and then discuss this and vote on it.
Thank you, Peter. I hereby open the public hearing. Are there select board members who would like to talk on this matter?
I'd like to talk about Dylan's rule for a little while.
My God.
Well,
Just kidding.
let's hear from the public first, and Dylan's rule would be a nice wrap up. Gary?
Getting there. I'm getting this thing fired up. Sorry, people. This is a little slow tonight, my computer.
Put another
So,
hamster in that wheel.
Gary, are you a member of the Traffic Safety Committee? Just
I
curious.
could be if you wanted me to be.
No. I'm just wondering.
You got more
Did you
committees.
miss
I'm
one?
willing. I got plenty of time. I mean,
Yeah.
hey, why not? Love
Anyway.
to join it. So I guess one of the questions, like, were you considering probably one of the signs over here on Canal and Elm going here by where early education is, where the schools are at? Because a lot of times cars are blowing the stop signs down here in Canal. The police officers used to be present at some point, and I don't know how many times I've seen lights at late at night doing a great job getting people blowing the stop sign going down Canal. And especially around the school, people are in a hurry to get to work. They got their coffees, they got their whatever, and they're zooming. And it's a very busy street going up Canal and Elm. So I didn't know if that was something that
Well,
might
I'll
be
tell you what,
considered.
Gary, we'll leave that up we'll take that comment, but tonight's public hearing is for these specific stop signs on Guilford Street and again also on South Street. Peter, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, yes, the point that you made, Gary, is really about enforcement of existing stop signs. So noted. But the matter before the select board is whether or not to make official these 3 signs at these other locations.
I agree. Make it official. Absolutely. Safety first.
All right. Is
Thank
there
you, guys.
anyone else? Thank you, Gary. Is there
Thank you.
anyone else from the public who would like to speak on that issue? On this issue of the stop signs on Guilford Street and the stop sign on South Street? All right, hearing none, I'll come back to the select board. Another chance to make a comment. Daniel, is there anything as your participation on traffic safety could lend to this discussion?
Yes, there's very little light pollution from these 2 stop signs, so my colleagues will be pleased to know. No, this has been thoroughly vetted. Both of these locations involved community input as well, so more than happy to get it on the books.
Ian? Thank you, Daniel.
I just wanted to thank the Traffic Safety Committee for the good work, and we we just had a pedestrian that got hit, and it reminds me that we need to constantly be evaluating the safety of our streets, and this is one more step towards that end. And I just really appreciate everyone who's on that committee who puts in the work to make Brattleboro a safe place to drive, walk, and bike.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Dan, Tim, time for the Dillon's Rule discussion?
No, I was going to make a motion.
Oh, very
Is
good.
everybody comfortable with it?
Okay.
We got
good.
a game. There's a game on very soon. The shortest motion of the night, I'd like to say that I'll make a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing stop signs on Guilford Street and South Street.
Great. Tim has made a motion to adopt an ordinance authorizing stop signs on Guilford Street and South Street. Will select board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Great, that's carried. So I will close that public hearing. And what's next? New business. Let's see. What is our next
Can I
item?
help you? It's the Community Marketing Initiative update.
Great. So Stephanie and Greg are here to discuss that, right? And let me welcome Stephanie, welcome Greg, and also congratulate Greg on his appointment as executive director of the chamber.
Hi, Greg.
Stephanie?
Hi, Stephanie.
Thank you.
So who wants to begin? Stephanie or Greg?
We also have Rosalie, who is coming on as well and joining us. And Patrick and I have talked, and Rosalie is going to be sharing her screen as well.
Great.
But anyway, hello and thank you for having us.
Welcome, Rosalie.
Greg, did you want to start, or do you want me to?
No, I thought we'd start with Rosalie, actually.
Okay, we were just going to give a little bit of context. So just before we move to Rosalie, just a reminder for all of you that that we're here to present. We are the Community Marketing Initiative team. There's 4 of us, and Lauren might be joining us a little later. So Greg, myself, Rosalie, and Lauren. And we also have an incredible advisory team as well that we'll talk a little bit about later. But the Community Marketing Initiative is 10%, comes from 10% of the 1% rooms and meals tax. And the idea behind it is to ensure that we continue to cultivate people coming into our community and visiting our town and enjoying our town for day trips or long weekends. And specifically, this phase has set a target audience of the BIPOC community. And so we have been doing that in various ways that we'll talk about in this presentation. So now I will pass it over to Rosalie.
Okay, so I'm going to get started. Lauren was going to be joining at 7:30. She was going to do the screen share, but I'm going to try to get that up on my screen. You can all tell me if you see it. Are you there, everyone? Okay, I'm going to try to do the screen share. Just a moment.
Well, while we're waiting, let me just say congratulations to Stephanie et al. On last Friday night's gallery walk. It was fabulous. There was dancing in the street, tremendous band, lots of people. It was great.
I don't know why I'm having difficulty with the screen share.
I can start it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I appreciate that, Greg. Thanks.
Okay, well, I can start while she's getting set up. Thank you for allowing us to be here. To my knowledge, the town of Brattleboro has never before chosen to market itself. In the past, it's generally relied on the chamber or the downtown organization to do this. So we are extremely happy to be partnering with the town, reinvesting hospitality tax dollars to affect a meaningful impact on our local community, our local economy. And I think that the data that Blue Whale will provide clearly illustrates that our message is getting out there to platforms and to outlets we've never, ever had access to in the past. And moreover, the partnership is not solely with the town. And as Rosalie will show, this initiative is about forming many partnerships with our businesses, with nonprofit organizations, with individuals. This is truly a collaborative community effort. And these relationships will continue to grow. The community marketing initiative vision is really catching on. I'd like to share a couple of comments from two of our partners. The first one was from Serenity at NECA. She wrote, "What an amazing and full itinerary. Thank you for all you're doing for the big picture of Brattleboro." And another one from John Potter from the Latches. He wrote, "The community marketing initiative has done a great job getting bang for its buck, working with Blue Whale to bring travel writers with many different perspectives and viewpoints to Brattleboro and let them see for themselves our wonderful town in action is an effective and efficient way to make the CMI happen. Connecting these writers with local leaders, influencers, and business owners puts delivery of our story in the hands of the best ambassadors this town has, the people who live, work, and love life here." And again, that was John Potter. So this initiative has created a host of these local ambassadors, folks who have stepped up to the plate to help facilitate these visits and act as really curators for all the different aspects of what makes Brattleboro unique. And we have found this essential because we all know that personal interaction makes a personal experience that much more memorable. So we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share our recent successes, and we look forward to advancing our strategies with even greater impact, because I've always believed that effective marketing is usually best achieved with cumulative and ongoing efforts. So thank you for letting us be here.
And I believe Lauren is joining and is looking to be let in, and she'll be setting up the screen share.
Who's got the crickets?
Maybe it's that dog.
Somebody has a cricket, somebody
The
has dogs.
crickets are my texting. That's my texting sound.
Wow,
So
Turn-
can you all see my screen?
not yet.
Not yet, because I'm on share screen and I have it up. And it's,
So Rosalie, I just sent you Patrick's email, so you can email it directly to Patrick and he's willing to do the screen share for you.
okay. All right. I don't know why I'm having trouble. I appreciate that. Okay, so. Again. All right. So Lauren, I can see is in the waiting room.
There she is.
And I sent that link, so hopefully you received it. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
All right, here we go. I see a full screen.
Okay, wonderful. So we can advance to the first slide and I can just go through some of the highlights of some of the work that we've been doing, working with Greg and Stephanie, and Lauren and I are going to tag team a little bit on this. I just want to make sure that she's listening in and able to connect. If not, I can just continue on in the interest of time. So I wanted to also give some context to some of the results. As you may or may not know, we started officially in mid-April. Oh, Lauren just sent me a note to please ask the host to unmute her. So I guess she tried to unmute, but she wasn't able to. So we started effectively in April 1st, hit the ground running, and we understood the directive as Stephanie outlined it, and we were pretty focused on some very specific initiatives. And I can happily say to date that we have really exceeded even my own expectations and our goals right out of the gate. So we have altogether, if you want to advance to the next screen, please. Thank you. So in just about 6 months, which, once we really started our media outreach efforts and our influencer outreach efforts and defining our goals and so forth. And so what has been a fairly short period of time, we've generated over 71 million impressions. And this is strictly publicity reach. This does not include social media audience engagement, which I cover separately on another slide. And that has come from a variety of national media, online, print, regional publications, blogs, influencer, I would say, content generated. We've had both BIPOC specific individuals come, which I'll get into a little bit later, and non-BIPOC specific, but that are sensitive to those topics and cover those topics as part of their travel coverage. So all in all, 71.1 million is is very, very high for a 6 month in of a program and a startup to boot, because usually you expect to, the first couple of months are spent on startup activities. But as I said, we were very aggressive in starting early. The other number that I want to point to here is our cost per thousand. Now, cost per thousand, and we'll give you the definition there, is an industry standard way of measuring that takes the amount of money spent on a program and calculates it against the amount of people reached. So what it would cost you to reach 1,000 people. So it's a measure typically used in advertising, but the PR industry has used it for decades now because it's the only quantifiable measure we have. So using the cost per thousand measure, we are at $1.63, which is very low. The average for paid advertising going rate right now, and this is cumulative, so it's higher for television, it's lower for web, is $2.80. So you can see tremendous value in an economy of scale that we can do in PR that you can't do in advertising. The other thing that's worth noting here is that that number was calculated against the total CMI PR budget allocated to Blue Whale, even though we still have several months left in this year's program. So what that means is that $1.63 is going to continue to go down as we continue to realize more coverage. So the value is going to be even greater. So I just wanted to point that out. We can go to the next slide. So this is a snapshot of what the 71+ million coverage, where it came from. This is feature level coverage of the destination. This is inclusions in roundup stories. These are some themed pieces, they're briefs, they really run the gamut. And this is by no means all the coverage that we've secured, but it just gives you kind of a good snapshot and a good range. Again, everything from blogs to national news to travel specific sites and outlets. Any questions so far? One thing that we do look at too, I should mention, and we work very carefully with the writers and influencers that we host and that we pitch to, is we try to be very consistent with our messaging so that, when we realize coverage, we're seeing very, a steady drumbeat of the same messages. And that includes, although it's not exclusively, things like multicultural and BIPOC friendly destination, a very varied destination. We look at post-pandemic friendly places to visit, undiscovered gems, and then of course things like culinary and the segment specific. So these are sort of messages that we both convey in our pitches and our written materials, and that we work very closely with the media to integrate into their coverage, into their stories. And I'm going to turn it over to Lauren to pick up where I'm leaving off on the next slide.
Thank you, Rosalie. Can everyone hear me okay? Can you hear me,
Yes.
Rosalie? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Yes. So if you'll move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about kind of how we make this all happen.
You there? No,
I see.
you can go back to the previous. I'm sorry. That's it. Yep.
This one, yeah, the media relations and targeted pitching. So we're so basically we look at all the different ways we can tell the story of Brattleboro. And we do that through targeted media relations, journalists that we know and have worked with for many years, who will often come to us when they're looking for sources for stories. For example, you'll see here the Inn on Putney Road is featured. This was for a lead that came our way from a journalist who was looking specifically for romantic inns in Vermont. and in New England. So that's how we were able to get the Inn on Putney Road and Brattleboro into that feature. But we look at everything from, you know, all the different ways we can tell the story through history and heritage travel, family and romance, which I mentioned some of the coverage there. This was among some of the first pieces we helped arrange for Brattleboro. But as we've gone along, and what we've done is work to create a toolkit, if you will, a pitching toolkit that we have sort of at the ready with story ideas and angles for journalists when they're working on stories, and also that we are proactively pitching seasonally and based on different trends in travel, and as we kind of follow the news cycle and what is being covered. So here we just listed a few of the areas that we've been able to work with Greg and Stephanie to identify and help build out story angles for Brattleboro.
And we can go to the next slide. So sort of a second spoke on the wheel as far as our program is concerned, where we focus a lot of time and energy. And this is the work that generates sort of those bigger destination stories. And that is what we call a visiting journalist program. And it basically is exactly that. It's where we bring journalists and influencers into the destination to experience Brattleboro firsthand. And it's through that firsthand experience that allows them to really cover the destination with a lot of depth. And in the case of some writers that write for multiple publications, they are able to collect a lot of content that they can utilize for a variety of different publications over the course of the different stories that they write about. So starting in April to this past weekend, we've hosted 9 journalists. There was our set goal, our pace was about 2 journalists per month. After the first few, where we understood and had a good idea and a good sense of what was involved in the itinerary planning and the resources that were available within the destination, we had to be sensitive to the fact that some businesses were on their way to opening post-pandemic, or they had more restricted hours like restaurants. So we had to try to schedule visits when businesses were open, when we had availability with our hotel partners. Some of the inns are still not open yet. So we had to take all these things into consideration in terms of the pace. And again, I can say from my own firsthand experience, I mean, I've been doing PR for many, many years. I would say even for some of the individual hotel clients that I represent, 2 to 3 visits a month is a comfortable pace. It's a manageable pace. And it's one that when it comes to resources, you're not overburdening the system as far as occupancy or revenue or things of that nature. So I think we're going to stick to 2 per month going forward, with the exception of there's some windows in the winter and again in April where the destination perhaps we've talked about doesn't really show well. So we may put a pause on those windows. So like, towards the middle of November to December, and then again in April. Another couple things worth mentioning is that we've worked very, very closely and very, very hard with Stephanie and Greg to try to share the wealth, if you will. When we work on these itineraries, and I know you received a copy of one, you'll see that we really try very hard to give exposure to as many entities, businesses, events as we can, whether it's through firsthand experiences or whether it's by inserting some of our partners in at dinners or breakfasts or what have you, so they can tell their stories. And that's been really, really effective. And over the course of just those 9 visits, we have had an opportunity to showcase one way or the other more than 70 businesses within Brattleboro. And I should say businesses, I should say events, and includes things like gallery walk, food truck roundup, different businesses and so forth. So I think that has been really effective, and we've seen it in the coverage, you know. I guess the last point I want to make is we've made great inroads with Visit Vermont that has allowed us to expand our reach in the media that we can bring into the destination. So in other words, we're not just limited to folks that are willing to drive, but so that are within a driving distance in our regional area, but they have agreed to partner with us when the writer, you know, is a good fit for everybody in sponsoring travel. So we're actually able to bring media, national quality level media in from out of the area and fly them in. And we did that with our latest guest, Matthew Meltzer, who is doing a story for Thrillist. And they also agreed to cover car rental charges that allowed for the Forbes writer, Michael Alpiner, who is here in the early part of September, allowed to facilitate that visit. And then we have another one that we're going to be collaborating on in January that I'll mention a little bit later. So you'll see a nice cross section there of journalists and influencers that we've had. So from family to travel to BIPOC to national to regional publications and so on. So, and that's been what we've tried to do in this first initial startup of the program, is to really try to get a diverse mix, get our messages out in different channels to different audiences to make the biggest impact that we can.
Great.
Lauren's next.
I'm next. Yeah, I'll talk about the virtual food event that we held in July. If you want to move to the next slide. Thank you. So what we did in July and leading up to it was planned a virtual food writers event. We branded The Food is Love, a virtual tasting presented by Love Brattleboro, Vermont. What we did here, and what has become very popular actually during the pandemic, is these virtual experiential events for journalists, since of course everything shifted to online. But what's been a positive side effect of that is that we've actually been able to reach and talk to and communicate with a lot of different journalists that we may not have had a chance to bring into the destination. So the thinking here is, what we did was, the strategy behind it was to identify and put together an experiential curated box that represented the food story and the drink story in Brattleboro. We worked together with partners to put these boxes together and shipped it out to each of the journalists who RSVP'd for this event. I think we had about 10 or 11 journalists, and you see them represented here. So what this does is it's a chance to introduce the destination and the destination's food story to a lot of these different writers who write for a number of different outlets, from the Today Show to Condé Nast Traveler to Business Insider. I mean, we had, it really runs the gamut from broadcast to print to digital media outlets. And what we also found is, so this is like an introduction, this event, and it actually led to having a journalist visit us, I think a month or two later, Michelle Herman, who we just wrapped up her visit. So that was kind of nice. I mean, it was, her first experience to Brattleboro was this virtual event, and following up with an actual visit in the destination. So that is a little bit about the virtual food writers event that we hosted back in July.
Yeah, and the plan is to continue to cultivate these relationships that have now been started between Brattleboro and these writers as they write stories, food-related stories. Now they have a familiarity with our story, our culinary story, and it just sort of kicks the door open for future opportunities, editorial opportunities.
Exactly, that they just would not have known about us and the story otherwise.
Yeah. We can go to the next slide. So this is a snapshot of where we are in terms of social media growth. So this is a measure of how much we've had in terms of gains on our Facebook and Instagram page. Now, I expect to see going into, after December, these are very, very high percentage increases that you see here. And there's a reason for that. I mean, obviously the activity on these pages went from, very little or, kind of a dormant state of those pages to very active pace when we took it over, only because of what happened last year with COVID and so forth. So we naturally would expect to see these kinds of percentages, although these are very, very high, 30% or near 30% increase in followers, which is what we're seeing in Instagram and on Instagram during this period of time, is even despite that, that's a lot of gain in followers in a short period of time. And I should mention that most of the growth has come from organic, as far as content and the influencers and press that have been very generous with the content that they've been sharing, that has allowed us to do more sharing. And so that's actually very, very strong. And it's also on track with our goal was a 30% gain. Now Facebook has grown at 11%, and that's not uncommon with what we've seen on the Facebook side. So Facebook has become one of those platforms where you kind of need to be there. You have to have a presence on Facebook, but it's not where the majority of the engagement is happening nowadays. So that is, we're perfectly fine and happy with a growth level of 11% there. And then the link clicks is also very, very strong. So again, that's just a snapshot. We cover a number of different topics. We share coverage. We talk culinary. We promote events. We support the partners as much as we can, including their hashtags and handles. So again, we really try to take the same approach as we do with the media visits, which is, however we can share the exposure with the destination, we try to do that. Lauren, was there anything you wanted to add on social media? Thank you.
I think you mostly covered it. I think the only other maybe item to mention is in social, especially with Instagram, our reach can only extend as far as the content we provide. What I mean by that is Instagram especially, and their algorithm has changed to make video much more of a driver. Whereas like if you post videos into your grid on the page, you're much more likely to appear in the news feeds of the people that follow your page. So with that, that's just something that we can keep in mind as we grow this page in the future. That knowing that video assets are always going to be very helpful with the growth and the content that we provide the page.
Okay, so this pretty much takes us to sort of where we are to date, both in our work and where we've had gains and so forth. And then this last slide is just to kind of give you a quick look at what's coming up for the balance of the year. And so, Lauren, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the campaigns and some of the anticipated coverage, and before we wrap up.
Sure. Yeah, we're working to identify and pitch to media the winter and holiday travel. We also are looking ahead to February, since many journalists are already thinking about Valentine's Day, romance travel and things of that nature. And we always, want to make sure to highlight seasonal events, food and culinary as well. But we also know that we have lots of anticipated coverage in the works. We actually have been working with Chris Elliott, who visited in August. We arranged his visit his hosted itinerary and visit to the destination. He will be writing about actually Love Brattleboro, Vermont, the tourism initiative for USA Today. So we anticipate that piece in the coming weeks. We've been in touch with him and fact checking that as of last week. So we know that, and we also know that we'll see most likely the Thrillist. Vine Pair was an opportunity that we were able to uncover and share with Putney Winery. And also we know that Forbes and Matador and Orbits will result from some of those recent journalist visits as well.
And I just want to go back to the media releases and campaigns for a second, because I want to make sure that it's clear. These are sort of new pitches that we're going to be putting forth, but it doesn't replace or mean that we're not going to continue to tell some of the other storylines. What I mean by that is, for example, heritage and history are a very strong story and pitch for us. And I have about 5 or 6 BIPOC related travelers, for example, that I'm going to be doing a pitch refresh to, because we just learned about a new mile marker with Lucy Prince that's going to be that's been dedicated in Brattleboro. So you know, there's writers with, for example, Essence and others that I've been cultivating for a while, and so I can, you know, serve that up as a very highly targeted pitch to them. And so that's kind of what Lauren was alluding to earlier when she said we've kind of amassed this pitching toolbox. So we have so many go-to storylines that we can always take to certain writers, either that we're continuously talking to or that come to us as looking for sources or content for their stories. So these are proactive pitches that we're putting together because of the time of year, certain themes, because we know media are always looking for stories around February travel, but it's sort of on top of the themes that we're continuously pitching and promoting. So I just wanted to convey that. And then here's some of the press and influencers that we already have scheduled. So later this month, in a couple of weeks, we have the Grub Father. He is a New York-based foodie influencer. He's also LGBTQ. He has approximately 310,000 followers on his Instagram page with lots and lots of engagement. And so we have him slated to come in a couple weeks to do a very food-focused run through Brattleboro, where he's going to be capturing some very specific content based on the stories and how he tells his stories online. We're also working on a visit with a producer of Refinery 29, which is Vice Media, which is, for those of you not familiar with Refinery, it's a huge online, I would say millennial / BIPOC directed family of outlets. And she's going to be doing something very specific to heritage travel, BIPOC travel. And we've had some preliminary calls with her already to sort of create an outline of what her visit will consist of. Ebony.com. We have a writer scheduled in January, and that's one that, again, Visit Vermont has stepped up to cover costs for her to do a stay. And we have Epoch Times coming in November, and Linda Laban, who's a regionally based freelancer who has already given us coverage, is looking to do a feature level coverage of the destination based on a planned visit. So we're arranging her stay. And then on the online front, we're going to be continuing our social media efforts. And we're also at the present time going through a refresh of the website so that all that content will be updated. There'll be new itineraries, new imagery. There'll be a press room added with articles that people can see, assets that media can access when they need it. And so it'll be much more engaging and, you know, for where we are now with the destination.
Rosalie, can I just add one thing at the end?
Yes, I'm done. We're done.
So I just wanted to make sure that we thanked our advisory team. So it is the four of us that have had a ton of fun working together. And as you can see by the itinerary in your hand, put a lot of energy into each one. But the advisory team is also Curtis Reed of the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, Francesca of Wyndham and Latches of Latches Arts, Lita, Dosa Kitchen, Casey from BDCC, Lissa from 118 Elliott and Words Project, Lindsay from the Retreat Farm, and Tracy John from Vermont Country Deli. And then I wanted to underline, because Rosalie was very modest, the Visit Vermont partnership. I just want to make sure that's clear that we leveraged the dollars that we were given by the town meeting and you all, the taxpayers. We leveraged that with the state of Vermont. They paid for airfare. And in my meetings with Heather Pelham, the Commissioner of Tourism, she held up this project as an example project and how can we emulate this around the state as an innovative idea. So thank you very much. And we're excited that this is now going forward again to town meeting.
All right.
We're very excited about the momentum that's been created.
Great. Thank you very much. Yes, we met Heather when she came to the opening of the Amtrak. And I thank you all very much for your presentation. Are there members of the select board who would like to comment? Then we'll just thank you and look forward to hearing, to discussing this matter at representative town meeting. Thank you all very much.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And it's 6 minutes to 8, and we usually break at 8. So let's take a break till 10 minutes past 8, and then we'll reconvene to finish up. Thank you all. Back. And I would be so happy to introduce Peter to discuss Union Station.
And I would be so happy to discuss Union Station. May I please work my way through being extremely flustered and explain why and get 30 seconds of dispensation from you. So the select board is well aware that behind the scenes this evening, while some of the other business is being done, staff has been working on getting a warning together for a special select board meeting that needs to be held tomorrow evening as part of the hiring of the new town manager. And we've been hustling to do this because we're going to be giving less than 24 hours notice. We want to give as much notice as possible and pull this thing together. I've got the language from Bob Fisher that we need to put into the warning. We've got it all put together, and I made a mistake in the first drafting of it that Jessica found and just called out to me, but I was the creator of the document. I need to make a quick fix to that. It's going to take me about 1 minute and send it to her, and she'll be able to warn the meeting while we go on with this meeting, if you'll forgive me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And not Jessica Gelter.
No, that's right. Jessica Stickler.
Not that Jessica wouldn't see it.
More kimchi? What is it that you're eating, Daniel?
Yeah, it's like a kimchi stew with tofu. Sarah
Mhm.
made it. It's very tasty.
Nice.
I heated it for too long in the microwave, so it still hasn't quite cooled enough.
Mm.
Hence, interrupting your meeting with it.
I was eating green beans from our backyard, so.
I walked around the office and tried to find candy bowls. And
I had 1/8
one.
of a brownie from the co-op that I ate 7/8 of during lunch today.
And I had beans and rice. It was yummy.
What
Good.
kind of beans?
All sorts.
Ooh, bean assortment.
Yeah.
medley.
I mean,
Oh,
there's
multi
butter
bean.
beans in the assortment. And so it was very
Oh, butter beans.
varied.
Okay.
One
Maybe
more
Tim watched the
advantage-
first pitch.
Yeah, I just want to say it's one more advantage to a Zoom meeting.
I'm not touching that. But thank you very much for your patience. Jessica Stickler will now get the meeting warned for tomorrow evening. And I'm happy to present the initial public consideration of the potential transfer of Union Station ownership to the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. I want to make clear at the outset, and then as I present a few details about this, it'll become clearer why I feel this way, that my personal perspective on this, my professional perspective on this, and my advice to the board is that the best interests of the community and the taxpayers are pretty clear in this matter. I think that that the way forward is very clear. But I'm also mindful of the fact that this is an important property in town. It's an important historic structure in our community. And so the decision is not to be taken lightly. And there's going to be 3 important phases to this. So I want to start by making clear that tonight you're going to discuss this publicly for the first time after having this select board and prior select boards having had many discussions about this over the years and different possibilities of how this might move forward, arriving finally in recent weeks at the details that we'll be presenting this evening. You'll discuss this tonight and receive some public input, probably, potentially at least. Danny Lichtenfeld, the director at the museum, is in the meeting and is prepared to participate in the discussion on behalf of the museum. And then we'll be asking, subject to how this goes this evening, but we anticipate asking you to approve at your next meeting on October 19th, a purchase and sale agreement between the town and the museum with some details that I'll describe in a few moments. And that action, as is detailed in the purchase and sale agreement, would be subject to approval at representative town meeting, either a special representative town meeting between now and next March, or next March 19th at the regular annual representative town meeting. So I want to be really clear before we discuss the details of this, that we are, after a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to bring it to this point, mindful of the importance of this to the community and the importance of taking it in these 3 steps so that there is opportunity for community participation in the discussion, and ultimately the decision will be made by representative town meeting. But your decision will sort of help this along in that direction so that it moves to that level of decision. So in a nutshell, the proposal is to transfer the ownership from the town to the museum, not for a price, but in an as-is condition. So there are responsibilities that the museum will assume that the town currently is the holder of those responsibilities. We are the responsible party for the major capital maintenance at the site, both on the building and elsewhere on the site. One particularly important part of this is the status of the retaining wall. Is a very large retaining wall in between the museum building and grounds and the narrow sidewalk and the street on Bridge Street. And that's an important factor in this. Again, we'll address a little bit in more detail and a little bit further into the presentation. But the reason for proposing that this transfer be done in this manner, rather than marketing the property for a potential sale, either to the museum or negotiated sale with the museum or a marketed sale to some other buyer, is because of the current status of our relationship and how it has evolved from the historical relationship between the town and the museum. This dates back to 1972, when the town purchased the Union Station building for $27,500, and did that for the purpose of the museum being able to be created at this site. And the museum was created initially on very limited means. Danny Lichtenfeld can probably speak much better than I can to the evolution from those humble beginnings, where there was a lot of community spirit, a lot of participation, but the longer term vision of it becoming as important of an institution culturally in our community and in our region as it has become, was a vision at that time. You know, it started literally from scratch, and it started in a building that had been neglected and was in danger of this historic landmark building was in danger of being lost. The town had several prior instances of landmark buildings, historically important structures, having been demolished. And so there was a community spirit that rallied around both the historic preservation aspect of this and the opportunity to create the museum at the site. So since 1972, that has been the nature of the relationship, that the town has been the owner, the museum has been the occupant, and has been in there essentially rent-free. We have a lease that sets out the terms of our relationship, and it requires the payment of $1 a year. And it was originally a 50-year lease, I believe. As time went by and then some additional communications occurred between the parties, it was extended. And we currently are in a situation, I said in the memo, 19 years remaining. It's actually 21 years remaining until 2042. So I want to make clear that correction from the written backup that was out. So there's 21 years remaining at $1 a year occupancy for the museum. And that is critically important to the structure of this deal. We had an appraisal done on this together with the museum. We retained an appraiser. And that appraisal indicated that because of the length of time that remains where the tenant has the ability to stay there for 2 more decades at $1 a year, there's virtually no market value. They put in the appraisal report the nominal value of $3,000. If we were to put this out on the market, they indicated, you know, maybe there would somebody willing to pay $3,000 in order to acquire a property where they would have capital maintenance obligations, including the replacement of a roof that's coming in sooner than later, within the next several years. And so the new owner, if there were to be a new owner that was anyone other than the museum, would have these responsibilities for major capital expenses and no source of income from the property until 21 years from now. And so it's essentially not marketable. The question for the town isn't whether to, you know, try to get a better price or try to sell this to someone else versus this opportunity, but rather whether to pursue this opportunity instead of maintaining the status quo, where the taxpayers are responsible for the major maintenance work at the site, and the museum is occupying at $1 a year. We believe, I personally believe, and I believe that from the executive session conversations that we've had, that the select board agrees with this, that because of the importance of the museum now as a cultural institution here in our community, but serving certainly providing benefits to our greater region, and seeing the not just stability, but sort of significant wherewithal within the arts community that the museum represents, that this is now an institution that can take on this responsibility, and we all can have great confidence that they would be good stewards of this historically important property. Danny will speak to the intentions and the actions that the museum is planning, but my point here is that our community rallied around this use and rallied around this building almost 50 years ago, 49 years ago now, for the purpose of saving the building and providing an opportunity for the creation of the Museum and Art Center. And as we sit here 49 years later, the building certainly has been saved. It's been well preserved, and the institution of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center has now become something important and very much able to stand on its own 2 feet and take on the responsibility of being the owner of this building. For that reason, and because we know there is upwards of $70,000, perhaps well higher than $100,000, the roof repair scoping, there's been some different discussions around exactly how much will need to be done in the roof replacement. The lowest estimate of cost for that, and this will need to be done likely within the next 5 years, the lowest estimate of cost is $70,000, and we've seen estimates substantially higher than $100,000. That'll be a cost borne by Brattleboro's taxpayers unless we do proceed with this transfer of ownership. And there is a longer term, very significant responsibility for that retaining wall. The records, we thought that in the course of the communication with the museum around the potential transfer of ownership, that checking the records regarding the location of the wall and the history of the wall might make it clear that it either goes with the property or doesn't go with the property, and it's a responsibility, continuing responsibility of the town. In fact, the records are unclear in that regard. And one of the important factors when we were having discussions about whether there ought to be a purchase price or not, one of the important factors in determining that in the end, we thought that quote unquote, selling the building for $1 would be an appropriate way forward was the fact that the museum is willing to take responsibility in this purchase and sale agreement for the wall, in addition to taking responsibility for the building and the grounds in their as-is condition. And so the town becomes completely free of future obligations at the site. The importance of that wall going forward is of much greater impact to the building and the grounds that it protects from falling into Bridge Street than it is to the general public any longer after the next couple of years go by and the new bridge to Hinsdale is built. For decades, that wall has separated the building from Bridge Street, and Bridge Street has been a location where thousands of people a day travel. After the new bridge is open, Bridge Street will be a local traffic only street. There won't be vehicles passing across the old bridges to Hinsdale. And so the importance of that wall becomes almost exclusively the protection of the building and holding up the site, rather than for the broader public benefit of protecting that roadway. So for the totality of this, based on the obligations that the town has had over the years, the fact that the museum, in addition to the development of the institution and the programming there and what it represents to us as a community, in addition to that, they have significantly invested funds from the museum in the interior work that's been done there. The gallery spaces have grown over the years, and there's been much renovation done to the interior at museum expense, not at town expense. Our responsibility is for the structure and the overall condition of the building. So based on the totality of all of that and the remaining 21 years on the existing lease, I believe that it is in the town taxpayers' best interest financially and in the community's best interest broadly that the museum and art center become the owner of this building, and that we proceed with your approval of the purchase and sale agreement at your next select board meeting. I believe I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Actually, one other detail that'll be important in terms of the background to this, and then I'd like to just recite quickly the basic terms of the proposed purchase and sale agreement, and then I'll be finished. So the one other important detail is that while site control and ownership of this facility would transfer to the Museum and Art Center, any future projects at the site would continue to be subject to the review and approval of the town through the land use processes that are in place for things that go on at any property in town. And so, for instance, in this particular location, because it is within the downtown area that the design review committee has authority to review projects for, any changes to the facade of the building would be subject to review by the design review committee of the town. And depending on the nature of what other work might go on at the site, there might be state regulations or other town regulations that would come into play. And going forward, while the town would no longer be the owner of the building, the town would have that regulatory authority to exert at the appropriate times over the potential changes at the site. The proposed terms are that the purchase price be $1, that the museum accepts the property as is, that the museum accepts full responsibility for the retaining wall, that the agreement is subject to representative town meeting approval by April 1st of 2022. So either at the March 19th regular meeting or at a special RTM between now and April 1st. that the agreement is also subject to Amtrak vacating the property by June 30th, 2024. The current plan for construction of the new Amtrak station over on the other side of the railroad tracks and Amtrak's move into that new facility, the schedule calls for that to occur by the end of calendar year 2023. So this agreement contains 6 additional months of cushion, if you will, some protection against possible delays in that project, so that it calls for Amtrak to have been relocated by June 30, 2024. And there's some language regarding the timing of closing of this transaction that relates to the timing of town meeting approval and the timing of Amtrak's relocation, and how either one of those might trigger a clock that would tick towards the having the closing and actually the transfer of the property. In reality, the town meeting approval is going to be insignificant, I think, to that, but the timing of Amtrak moving will be actually the key to what will dictate the ultimate timing of the closing. The town, in addition to retaining our regulatory authority at the site, will permanently retain all rights we have to any water and sewer infrastructure that passes through the property. And between now and closing, the agreement could only be assigned. We don't anticipate there would be any assignment by the museum, but to protect against the possible assignment to some other party that the town might not approve of, the agreement contains a provision that the museum could only assign its rights to proceed with this transaction with the town's prior written approval. Thank you.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much. That was very thorough. Do members of the select board wish to comment on that presentation?
No. I had one little point of clarification, just in case somebody misinterpreted something Peter said. Is that okay?
Sure.
Just wanted to point out that Bridge Street will certainly still have traffic, but the amount of traffic would be greatly reduced.
Yes.
So less, volume, of course, because of the new configuration. I think when you said that, it sounded a little bit like it would be completely rerouted. And of course, there'll still be river access to the walking, biking bridge.
Access to the train station, to the Barrows and Fisher property, and to Whetstone Station. So yes, all of that will remain, but the amount of traffic there will be significantly reduced. And it's likely that at some point there'll be some reconfiguration of that, since it's now, it's a tight space for all the traffic that it handles, but there is an extra lane in there, and we anticipate that it'll be made more pedestrian friendly at some point, but haven't done any work on an actual design of that yet.
Great. Thank you.
Jessica, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, I think this is a lovely idea. I love the idea of this building moving into the hands of the stewardship of the museum fully. It was a place where my grandfather worked in the ticketing counter and slinging the mail bags on the trains as they came by. So it's exciting that it continues to be part of the town, part of our community, part of our economy, part of what makes Brattleboro great. And I really want to commend Danny for his leadership of the museum over these last many years. And as a great, the museum's a great economic driver for our downtown, as well as a great cultural resource for our community in lots of different ways. And one example is, I think it was maybe the early 90s when they had someone build a Japanese structure outside the front. It was really exciting for my family, I remember, because my grandmother was Japanese, and she owned a business downtown, and it was really exciting to see something from her culture, from her home, be shared with the community in that way. And the museum has always had a really wonderful been a wonderful hub of sharing culture and sharing creation. And yeah, so I just want to say thanks to Danny.
Well, thank you for those comments. Ian?
I see. I just have one quick question. So to totally thank you very much for that, Jessica. But I'm curious about the retaining wall. So Peter, is there some kind of mechanism beyond the PNS that is going to be put into the record, like the land record or something, to clarify the ownership of the retaining wall? So like 100 years from now, there's now a new people like having the exact same question, like who owns this retaining wall?
So I'll confirm this with Bob Fisher to make sure that what I'm about to say is exactly correct and not just correct in spirit. But I believe that he will take care of that in the preparation of the deed. That you know, implementing the purchase and sale agreement, if it is ultimately approved by both the select board and the representative town meeting, that in the preparation of the deed, which would then be recorded, that'll be made, that ownership and responsibility of the wall will be made very clear.
Okay, thank you.
And one more thing, I'm sorry, that I should have made clear in the presentation. When I just said about the 2 steps of approval by the town, it reminded me that I did not note for the record that this has been approved by the Board of Trustees at the museum. So the remaining steps at this point would be select board approval and representative town meeting approval.
Thank you, Peter. All right, let's ask David Levenbach what his comments are.
Thank you. David Levenbach, District 3. I am guessing that the station would be a auxiliary gallery space once the museum builds its new facility. And I'm wondering if there might be a provision giving the town a privileged right to repurchase the building in the event the museum were to market down the road.
Peter, you want to answer that?
I think that's actually more appropriate for Danny to speak to on behalf of the museum if he's prepared to do that tonight.
Danny Lichtenfeld, are you able to be interrogated?
I am.
There you are.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Jessica, thank you for those nice comments. I really appreciate that. And thank you all of you for working on this. And thanks especially Peter. We've been working on this intermittently for many years now, and it's exciting to see it get to this point. So I'll try to respond to David's question. What I can speak to are the museum's intentions for the future, and as they relate to our plans for the Union Station facility, and also what little I can tell you about how things are going with our expansion dreams across the street. So I'll start there. There's no thinking currently in play for anyone here at the museum that whether we succeed in expanding across the way or don't, that there are still many, many hurdles to overcome for us to make that project a reality. All of our hopes and dreams and visions for the future involve continuing to use Union Station as part of the museum operation. But that's not to say that that couldn't change 20 years from now with future leadership of the museum, where your question, David, would be apropos. You know, like what if future leadership of the museum decides that it no longer needs this building and wants to market it? So obviously that, you know, that is something that could happen. It's not something that any of us involved with the museum are envisioning right now. And I think as to the, you know, the like possible additional provision that you're proposing and that maybe the town would want to incorporate into this agreement, I'm not sure if the current board of the museum would still want to go ahead with this transfer of ownership with that future restriction or limitation on the saleability of property in place. So that would be something we would have to discuss. So all I can tell you is that right now, everyone involved with the museum has is imagining nothing for the future of the museum other than our continuing to utilize this property for museum purposes. We're not at all going into this with the intention of selling it at some point or thinking, well, once we come online with our expansion across the way, we want to get rid of this building. That's not how we're thinking currently.
Right, so what is being contemplated here is a clean purchase based on the terms that Peter identified.
Peter, Liz, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Peter, just as far as preservation of the building, what sort of, does the town have anything, for future ownership, anything in the way of historic preservation or rules set around that for that parcel?
Right. So the main protection currently is the design review committee. So there is aesthetic protection. There are, of course, zoning regulations that speak to the different kinds of uses that would be acceptable there versus what wouldn't be allowed. But as far as protecting it, sort of in the integrity of it and as a historical structure, we don't have a historic landmark program or ordinance at this time. It is something you're probably aware from your time on the Planning Commission. It is something that the town has been looking into. There's a classification called being a certified local government. That's an important. There's a process, a federally required process that you go through to become certified as a local government that can impose regulations to protect landmark structures. There's just a set of parameters you have to comply with to do that. We've looked into becoming a CLG. There's a decently heavy lift involved in that. I think it'll be something that some future select board will be considering with much broader implications than this property. You would never do this related to a particular property. You become a certified local government when you want to have a landmark preservation program that is, protecting historic structures and historic neighborhoods and corridors in the town and so on, where the historic buildings and uses are important to the community. So there's a much bigger, broader conversation to be had at some point in the future around having an actual active landmark preservation program. In the meantime, we do have the design review committee that would speak to changes in the appearance of the building. I'll stop there and make sure I've answered your question. And then I'd like also at some point to offer a comment related to this sort of right of first refusal possibility.
Yes, you have mostly answered my question. I guess the other piece of it was, does the historic overlay district cover this property or not? So and would that be helpful in funding, or what would that mean?
Yes, so thanks for that. Because it is within the area that is primarily downtown structures that are subject to they're within that district that are subject to design review by the town. That means it also is eligible for the potential of historic tax credits and other kinds of benefits in doing work at the site that it might not be eligible for otherwise. But there are criteria related to those sorts of grants that are involve more than just the location and regulatory status of the building. So I wouldn't be able to speak to exactly what the property might or might not be eligible for in that regard. May I speak to the potential repurchase? So that's something we've given actually a lot of thought to and actually had some fairly lengthy discussions about over the years. We've referenced a few different times that this is a conversation that's been ongoing on and off for several years now. And there have been times in that discussion when we've actually looked at, whether or not it was appropriate, and if so, how we would word a provision, including a provision that would provide that kind of opportunity to the town. And frankly, based on the totality again of the history that I tried to provide in the presentation this evening, the town purchased this for a particular purpose, and that purpose has been accomplished. It's long since been accomplished. And so I think that the community has received the value that we sought in the investment that was made in 1972. The fact that we've been able to make relatively small financial investments, it's been $7,000 a year of contribution to the ongoing maintenance of the site. So that's been the primary financial contribution that the town has made. We have done projects there, but they've been relatively limited in scope in terms of the maintenance activity that's been required for larger capital work there. And we are now approaching a period of time when the building is going to need more. And it is that has motivated us to see this as, an opportunity that is in the best interest of the community. If it is in fact something that the museum wishes to proceed with. We've reached a point in those communications where the museum is interested in proceeding. And I personally would offer that the protection for the town to have some special rights to recover the property, I think would have been more appropriate to include in a purchase and sale agreement where the museum was actually owing something more to the town than I think they actually owe to the town at this point, right? If the town were doing a favor for the museum in this transaction, then I think that there, good argument could be made that there ought to be a return favor of protecting the town some unknown years down the road of potentially a changed circumstance or a changed desire from the museum. In fact, what I think is that the both parties are benefiting here. The museum is gaining a greater level of control. The town is being freed of this responsibility for a site we don't need to be responsible for any longer. And if at some point, years from now, there is some change in direction at the museum and the community wishes to, reacquire the property, it feels fair and right to me in the totality of these circumstances that would be a new issue for the community to grapple with at that time, whether to become involved in possibly reacquiring the site or whether to just step back and let someone else become the owner, knowing that the town would continue to have regulatory authority over it.
Okay. Any further discussion regarding this topic? Jessica?
So from what I heard from what you just said, Peter, is that for the last however many years, the town has felt that the museum and having the museum was worth the investment of $7,000 a year. And now we're offloading a property on them that's going to cost them money. And I'm interested in the idea that, I wonder where that $7,000 a year is going to go now, and how might we continue to support, cultural growth of our community with that, perhaps.
I think that's a conversation entirely appropriate to the upcoming budget meetings. I would say, so as not to completely dodge, I don't mean to be dodging. I just think that whether that ends up being a savings or whether it gets redirected to an additional, some new cultural purpose, or whether it gets redirected to some other purpose that you determine and town meeting ultimately approves. I think that remains to be decided. What I would say is, as part of this disengagement for the town and sort of recognizing that the museum is a very well-established institution who, have made this decision, they'd like to own the property, they're very well equipped to own the property and be responsible for it, that the reason for continuing the $7,000 a year has been because we own the property and they're doing maintenance at the site. So I would say that we will not include a $7,000 contribution in the upcoming budget for that purpose, thinking that it is now no longer needed. But and I see Danny raising his hand, and the timing of the transfer is where I think Danny's going to go. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here, and that the danger of doing that is we should still keep the 7,000 in for this year, because you're going to be occupying a town building certainly for the entirety of fiscal year 23. So so we will keep the 7,000 in for this year, but that's a conversation to be had in the months ahead, looking to future fiscal years when that $7,000 is no longer an appropriate necessary appropriation from the town.
Great. Are we all set? All our questions answered? And we will consider this again. Oh, Tim?
Oh, sorry. Well, first of all, I wanted to check to see if Danny had his hand or no.
I think Peter answered it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, let me just chime in because it just inspired me to say something, and I'm sorry. I'll keep it short. This is one of these really nice moments where, like, having been on the board a while comes in handy in my brain, because I'm confident it's been over 3 years where we've had periodic short discussions in executive session, as is our appropriate right. And I had two main concerns from the beginning. That was the facade. I was concerned with the facade protection going forward. They were greatly alleviated by the fact that the design review committee will have some say over that to preserve the beauty of the building. Not to mention that the museum has an interest in preserving the beauty of the building, of course. And my second was to not, I had this feeling like not to leave money on the table for the taxpayers, because that's part of our job, is to protect the taxpayers' interests. And then that assessment came in, which really is a very interesting development when you look at the real value of it, when you consider you have 20 years of a guaranteed occupant. My thinking most recently has just shifted completely into not monetary value, but the non-tangible value of going forward with this, with a new steward who are, if it's plural or singular, I don't know, a trusted partner in our community. And that's what we must do as a municipality, is find trusted partners and move forward together, because that's when you make the transition from capital T to small t, and you broaden it out to the community. So that's why I'm so excited about it. I don't make any bones about it, that I think this is a good thing for Brattleboro. So thanks.
Thank you for that perspective, Tim. And I think it's interesting that we do have that broad view and recognize that, longtime watchers of select board meetings will understand that we collaborate with everybody about everything. And that's kind of the name of the game in town government. That's the best way for us to be a vital part of our community. Daniel, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say very briefly that I'm in favor of all of the foregoing, and think that it is mutually, beneficial to both parties. And I agree really with what you just said now, Liz, because I think that this is a good reminder of how we are all involved in what happens in Brattleboro. And so this sort of partnership or landlordship has served both parties fine over the last, several decades. And now it is in better interests to, to sever that relationship and, and let the museum do their thing. And I have no concerns whatsoever about like some number of years from now that the museum will, pull some kind of thing where it's like to the detriment of the town. The museum is invested in the town. It's the Brattleboro Museum and Arts Center. It is situated right there in the heart of our downtown and brings people from all over the world to town. And this is not, this is not like Walmart here. This is, these are local people. My in-laws were involved in the early days of the museum. Some of you might know that my wife currently works at the museum, and this is an organization that could be freed from the shackles of paternalism to do its thing and to spread its wings. So I'm all in favor of that.
Ian?
Yeah, I'll jump on the bandwagon here. I just want to, it's to me, it's a common sense thing to pass this on to a responsible community member, a trusted partner, and a new steward of the property. And for me personally, having only been on the board for 2 years, this is an opportunity for me to see the town act in a way that really respects the history. And I really want to commend Peter in your presentation tonight, and also in your work on this, really laying that history out and talking about, the town really has gotten what it meant to get out of it when it made that investment in '72. And now this is the next step for the museum, and it is the right thing for all the parties. And I'm really excited to see the future of the museum be brighter than ever, and I'll continue to go see great art there. So.
Great. I think we've all considered this, and we will continue the matter until our next meeting on October 19th. So thank you. And thank you, Danny.
Thanks,
Thank
Danny.
you, and
Thanks,
thank
Danny.
you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
All right. Now we have our FY21 year-end financial report. Thank you, Peter.
We do indeed. I'll make a brief summary report, and then I'm happy to answer whatever amount of detailed questions any of you might have to, go into different sections of the budget or particular line items. But the most important thing going on here is there are a few key factors that contributed to a sizable favorable outcome. And we always get careful about our words here, because we use fund balance to contribute to capital improvements and other one-time expenses in each year's budget. The terminology surplus is a little loose when we talk about the total value of how we finished a year compared to our budget in a year when we did as well as we did this year. So we did so well this year, we didn't have to use any of the fund balance that we had allocated. So staff recommended, select board also recommended, approved our recommendation, passed it on to town meeting, and town meeting approved the use of $223,000 of fund balance in this FY21 budget that ended on June 30th of this year. But because of the reasons that I'm going to cite in just a moment, we finished the year so well that we actually had a surplus of revenues over expenses of $448,625. So the fact that we ended with an actual surplus, more money that is being put into the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, meant we didn't have to spend any of that $223,000. So to look at how we did in the outcome of the fiscal year compared to the budget for the fiscal year, you actually need to add the 223 and the 448. And that's what shows that we finished actually $671,625 better than budget. That is higher than normal for us, but it is not outside of the target range. We talk a lot about 2 to 4%. If we come in less than 2%, with a surplus or a better than budget, but in the range that's between 0 and 2%, we're real tight. We never want to be in a deficit position. That's a very bad place to be for all different kinds of reasons, in terms of both the impact for that year, as well as then the catching up impact that it represents going forward into future years. So we always want to end a little better than budget. And in a $19.5 million budget, actually at any scale, you want to be looking at approximately 2 to 4%. At a $19.5 million budget, that means 4% is almost $800,000. And so while it used to be in years past when our budget was lower, that end of year positive outcome of this scale was sometimes a source of concern, like, have we been taxing too high, or is there something we missed here? I would suggest that we're not, based on the current status of the town's budget, based on the best practice of being in that 2 to 4% range. This one came in at 3.6%, I believe. It's in here somewhere. Yes, 3.6%. And based on the particular aspects of what caused that, some COVID-related aspect and the some other factors that I'll cite here in a second, particularly the significantly greater than expected performance of the local option sales tax. All of those factors combine to indicate, I think, that 671 is something we should be grateful for, and it's appropriate, and it creates some flexibility going into this next year's budget process that we'll be discussing in beginning just a month from tonight. So the four main factors in contributing to this positive outcome were that we collected $323,053 more in local option sales tax than we expected to. Just a huge dividend for the community. We are catching up to that in our budgeting now because we've seen a couple of years in a row. This is the most significant over collection of that particular revenue source that we've seen. But we have seen it now in the first few years of this. We've done better than budget substantially each time. So we're getting better now at calibrating that. That'll be reflected also further in the upcoming budget. The staffing in the police department cost $180,671 less than was budgeted because of vacancies. So there were savings in a number of areas because of vacancies, and then overage in overtime and a few other staffing related costs. But the net of that was a savings to the town of over $180,000. Workers' compensation, we knew we were going to have a good year, and the tally on it actually came in substantially better than even we had predicted. And so we spent $134,482 less than budgeted on workers' compensation. And property tax receipts came in a little higher than expected, $130,799 higher than expected. Those four items together account for more than the $671,000 better than budget outcome. The entirety of all other aspects of town operations, all our investments in capital, all our departmental operations, all of our administrative overhead expenses, every other line item in the town's budget, when you put the cumulative impact of everything else together, there's about $100,000 more expended than was budgeted. But the offsetting impact of these four significant positive outcomes is what created the surplus. There are three other things I'd like to note just for the record, because they're unusual in this year because of COVID. They did not substantially contribute to the favorable outcome for the fiscal year. But recreation and parks programming was very significantly affected by COVID. And so we spent a lot less than we had planned to, and we also collected a lot less in revenue. The actual numbers are, we saved about $64,000 of expenses, but we under collected our revenues by about $75,000. So the net of that COVID impact was reduced. It reduced the surplus by about $11,500. The rental housing inspection program was similarly affected because we had to suspend that for several months during the early part of COVID. It got reactivated coming out of last winter and has been active continuously since then. But there were several months when it didn't operate. And so we had costs that were far below what we expected, $48,636 less than we expected to spend on that program in its first year of operation. And we collected $31,275 less in fees than what we expected. That collection of fees is going to still result in the people getting the services that they're paying for. There's been a delay for some properties in when the inspections are occurring, but we've caught up to that and are now ongoing with the program as anticipated. So going forward, there'll be more equality between the amount of revenue coming in and the amount that's being spent to actually implement the program. In this first year, we over collected the revenues compared to the expenses because of the COVID shutdown. And that positively affected the surplus by $17,000. And finally, just something that had very little dollar impact, $15,000, but was a factor, almost hard to remember now, but for all of you, it will be a clear recollection that in June of 2020, the select board adopted the town's budget for fiscal year 21. It was an extraordinary moment, probably a one-time event. We hope it'll be just a one-time event. Was necessary because COVID was in its early stages and we were all trying to find ways to adapt and looking for how we might be able to hold a representative town meeting, but hadn't found a way forward yet and didn't have time to warn one. And one fiscal year was going to end and the next was going to start and we needed to have a budget. And so the select board, properly under the emergency authority that you had at that time under the state's emergency declaration, adopted the FY21 budget. Because of that, later in the year, when we were able to hold the RTM in September, and RTM decided to allocate more funds to human services than what was in the original budget that staff had proposed and you had approved, we ended up this one time with an outcome in human services part of the budget that is unprecedented, which is that the budget and the actual expenses don't match. Usually, because both the full budget and the human services allocations get approved at representative town meeting, we end up spending exactly the amount that was allocated to human services within the budget. That didn't happen this year for this reason, because of the disconnect between a select board approval of the budget and RTM's approval later of the additional expenses for human services. And so we overexpended that portion of the town's budget by $15,835 in fiscal year 21.
Well, Peter, that was another tour de force. Thank you. Makes a lot of sense. I remember early in the pandemic, we were all concerned about the fiscal health of the town and the fiscal health of the community members. And it's pretty amazing that we have this nice, healthy budget in front of us today. Any comments? Ian?
I have one quick question. I'm committing a total faux pas for myself, which is asking a budget question in public that I don't really know if I understand fully. So it's going to show my potential ignorance here. Peter, so in a normal situation, the unassigned fund balance that we have at the end that goes into capital in the next fiscal year, does the fact that we do that create the next essentially more like over the budget amount of 2 to 4%? So are we basically like each time we have unassigned fund balance and we put it into FY next year, that pushes us a little further because we're now paying for those capitals? And so this particular year, the reason why it's different is because not only did we move that money into the next fiscal year, but then we covered everything with the fiscal year's money and had more on top of that. Am I understanding that correctly?
You're on the right track. Yeah. So that is in fact the fact that we had such a favorable outcome that we actually have a surplus. You know, in true accounting terms, we have a surplus of $448,000 this year.
Yeah.
Meaning that we didn't have to use any of that 223. So that 223 is going to remain available to be committed in the upcoming year. And we're contributing additional funds to fund balance by having this overall favorable outcome. So that's going to make it possible to have a good year in terms of availability of unassigned fund balance for capital purposes or other one-time needs. The thing that gets tricky right there, that far, what you said is right, and I think is really easy for all of us to kind of process, right? So if you've worked with the town budget for a while, you kind of see how those pieces fit together. The part that is frankly a mystery to, even me, and most of us who don't do sophisticated accounting for a living, because for this next piece, we rely on not only our own staff, but the auditors significantly in determining the available fund balance. There are parts of our general fund balance that get reserved in various ways and get recalculated over time based on the town's changing balance sheet, and there are factors that are considered by the accountants that result in them advising us how much of the total general fund balance is unassigned fund balance, how much of it is assigned to various purposes, and how much is unassigned. And from year to year, the largest driver of changes in unassigned fund balance are definitely the surpluses, the operating surpluses from the prior year, but they're not the only factor. And so, we'll have more to say about that actually, because we did have an unusual thing happen this year. I don't want to spend time on it tonight. I'll be shooting from the hip, and we're going to have, better explanation to offer you when we bring it forward as part of the budget. But we did have something unusual that happened in that calculation this past year that will contribute to us having, not only some surplus funds that'll help us have a healthy unassigned fund balance, but this other factor as well, that combined are going to leave the select board initially and then ultimately town meeting with a lot of flexibility this year to decide, are you looking at particular purposes for which that should be spent in the near term, or do you want to hold maybe a little bit more than the 10% this year because we're in a really robust situation? And that together with the ARPA, together with the leveraging of the ARPA through, state programs that are going to use state ARPA funds to combine with town ARPA funds to become, more impactful. There's a lot of decisions around all that stuff that will not be made while you're making the FY23 budget decisions, but are going to be really important decisions made over the next year or so, impacting the town for many years to come. So we'll bring forward some more information about that. And I think one of the things that's going to become a really important part of this upcoming budget process is wrestling with this question of, in a time when we have a more substantial unassigned fund balance than usual, what is going to be the best use of that, or choice not to use all of it just yet, because there might be a better purpose that it could be put to over the longer period of time.
Great.
That answers my question. Thank
And
you.
Before Tim raises his hand, I just want to say that this again shows the benefit of his efforts in passing the local option sales tax, which I was greatly in favor of, as many of us were. And also the part that, internet sales is a part of it was a big help.
Yes.
Tim?
Thank you, Liz. And this is a layup for Peter. It's something I suspect I know the answer to, but I don't want to go out on the limb. The property tax receipts, 130K more than expected. Just tell us very briefly the story behind that. Is that, no, actually, I'll let you tell the story instead of guessing.
I wish I could tell you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was a layup.
It's probably a combination of factors.
It could definitely be like, because every year there's a certain percentage of property taxes not collected, and then it's delayed, and then so it may be that people were just, ironically, during this difficult past year, a little better at keeping track of being able to pay bills. But
so we do know that we didn't encounter the sort of really significantly higher level of delinquency than usual, which we feared might happen because of COVID. And, I think that's attributable to the enormous investments that the federal government and the state government made in propping up businesses and individual households during a period of time when the economy was really, all but stopped. But in any event, we didn't suffer that outcome. There are ways in which this also relates to the fact that the town collects the taxes for the town and the school, and then remits to the school. That is the substantial contributing factor to the unassigned fund balance conversation that we're going to have. We've had a couple of years in a row where we did very well. There are years when we actually are for state law by the relationship that is established in statute to actually pay out more to the school than what we anticipated. And that leaves us short of our own revenues.
Right.
But then there's years when it works the other way. And this year it worked very substantially the other way. But I'm not sure exactly how to describe the cause of this $130,000. I just know that it's a fact that in the real-time collection of property taxes, we did better than expected by about $130,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other select board members like to comment? Well-
Sure, why not?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yes, I'm glad to read this. It was interesting to kind of flick through the line by line. I look forward to budget season where we will delve even more deeply into all of this stuff. To a good little kind of teaser for what is to come.
Yes, I was just going to say it's definitely whetting the public's appetite for the exciting meetings that'll take place starting November 2nd on a weekly basis. All right, anyone from the public like to speak on this matter?
Anybody in person?
All right, our last item is the three members of the fence viewer team to be reappointed as committee and board vacancies. Shall we make a slate? Would anyone like to volunteer to submit a slate?
There is a motion in your administrative report if you care to use it.
Is
And
there?
it does move it forward, move these three folks forward as a slate.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay, great.
I move to reappoint Nicholas Biddle, Tim Kipp, and Lee Madden as fence viewers for the terms to expire on June 30th, 2022.
Great. Ian has made a motion to reappoint Nicholas Biddle, Tim Kipp, and Lee Madden as fence viewers for terms to expire on June 30th, 2022. All select board members in favor of this motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 There we are. That has passed. Yes, Tim, Peter.
May I, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but before we move to that final motion, I wanted to announce tomorrow evening's meeting and explain to the remaining public, we don't have a lot of folks in the meeting, but there may be people watching that would benefit from this. And Chris Mays is still here, so hopefully that can also help get the word out about it.
Absolutely.
May I go ahead and do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we had a flurry of communication going on earlier that sort of intruded into the meeting a couple of times briefly because there is a need. The board has been conducting the process by which they're selecting a new town manager, and there has been progress on that in the last few days that has led to discussions with a particular person, and there's a need for there to be some further discussion by the board tomorrow evening with the executive recruiter who is assisting the town. Because of the urgency of the matter to keep the communication moving expeditiously between the applicant and the town, this meeting needs to be held tomorrow, and there isn't 24 hours to provide notice. And so when we're normal, providing warnings in a normal manner. We're always providing at least 24 hours notice, usually more than that. I was conferring earlier this evening while the meeting was going on with Bob Fisher to make sure we did this properly and followed his guidance. He suggested, and I want to say that warning is now out. Jessica Stickler took care of it while we were doing this business since the 8 o'clock break. So the public has received, sort of the maximum notice we possibly could give. And right on the face of the warning, it describes that the sole purpose of this meeting is to go into executive session to have some additional discussion between the select board and the executive recruiter, so as to continue the communication that's occurring between the town and the town manager applicant. And that there will be no action taken tomorrow, either in the executive session or in the public meeting by the select board. So proper public notice for an emergency special select board meeting has been given. The explanation for why it's such an urgent matter has been given, and Bob is fully comfortable that you can go ahead and meet at 5 p.m. tomorrow on Zoom with the select board meeting room available as a location that members of the public can attend if they wish, although there won't be anything to see or hear because it'll just be for an executive session. But we've complied with the law and moved the matter forward so that you can have your meeting tomorrow evening.
That's great, Peter. Thank you. Okay, now I will entertain my favorite motion.
Jess, go ahead.
Do it.
I'll move to adjourn.
Great. All members in favor of adjournment, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All right. Thank you
Everybody.
all, to Peter, Patrick, the media.
Recording stopped.
Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Right, go
See you
Sox.
tomorrow.